Hello, everybody. This is Steve Yoder. Welcome to the seventh and last week in Legal Studies 457-557, Business Law for Accountants, here at the Collat School of Business in the spring of 2024. This week we are looking at how our laws help promote competition, why those laws are in place, and we're also going to look at how accountants and lawyers can be found liable to either their clients or to third parties in the case of accountants who prepare financial statements used by others. And we're going to be looking at the very important topic of business ethics. But let's go ahead and get started. Here was your extra credit opportunity for week 6. The correct answer to this question was Harvard and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Their affirmative action policies for admissions were challenged. The case went to the Supreme Court and those policies were struck down. Tonight, because I am posting this on Monday the 22nd of April, tonight all students in the 557 section of the course should submit by 11:59 p.m. their reflective memos on PCAOB enforcement actions. Antitrust law is another name for a body of law that helps promote competition. The granddaddy of these laws is the Sherman Act, named after this guy, one of the shortest but most powerful laws per word that we have in the United States. This is the anti-monopoly law. Think about how life would be different if there were monopolies in these products: flat screen TVs, soft drinks, banks. Life would be very different. I think it's pretty clear that perhaps prices would be higher and service would be lower, but we've seen a great deal of activity in the area of promoting competition in the last several years, ranging from the NCAA being called a monopoly, and we know what happened as a result of that. Look at this interesting case. 25 years ago, Microsoft was accused of being monopoly because they tied their operating system to their browser. And look what Apple has just been accused of 26 years later, tying their iPhone to use of their payment system. Sounds like tying certain products is going to get you in trouble with the antitrust regulators. Look at this as another example of Microsoft 25 years later having tied Teams to Office, untying it in order to satisfy the antitrust laws. Another law gets at non-competitive behavior as a result of mergers. It's the Clayton Act. We've seen a lot of mergers, particularly in the airline industry, that have been approved, but here's one that the government has objected to. We don't have these brick and mortar grocery stores in Alabama, but they want to merge, and the federal government does not like that idea. Here's an example of a merger that did close about 6 months ago, once again involving Microsoft. Interestingly, the Republicans in Congress don't like all this antitrust enforcement activity, and they have proposed a budget that would take away the budget of those enforcement agencies that go after these enforcement actions. So I doubt that will happen, but we'll see. Moving on to how accountants and lawyers can be found liable, there are several general ways. One is negligence. If you've simply not lived up to the standard of care, which is usually generally accepted accounting principles or generally accepted auditing standards. Look at this example. Some people have reverse engineered what happened at the German company Wirecard a few years ago and said that if Ernst & Young auditors had just done one more thing that was within the standard of care, the disaster that occurred at that company would not have happened. Professionals can also be found liable, of course, for lying, for defrauding others. Congress believed 22 years ago that the accounting industry had not done enough to regulate itself, so it passed a very extensive multi-part law called Sarbanes-Oxley that basically raises the standard of care by law. CPAs can be found liable as tax preparers, which is a defined term. Here are some other duties for accountants, including confidentiality. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants is serious about this rule. Acts discreditable. What acts by CPAs bring discredit to the industry? I can pretty well guarantee you that your CPA exam will have some question about client files. That is one of their favorite areas to question. In September 2023, just about 7 months ago, the AICPA provided some very specific illustrations regarding the ethics, in-house ethics exams that accounting firms are required to offer and required to require among their CPAs that these rules are designed to prevent the cheating on no cheating exams. Finally, business ethics. This is covered in Chapter 3 of the textbook. Business ethics is just a flavor of the general area of ethics, moral principles of right and wrong that I hope are second nature to all of us. But in a business setting, what do those mean? And that's what we'll be looking at here. Most companies have passed codes of conduct that are designed to codify. Interestingly, Enron, the company that failed 25 years ago, had a very, very good code of conduct that was completely ignored. There are many different approaches to how to reason through an ethical dilemma. Duty-based ethics, like just follow a simple set of rules, like the Ten Commandments, or do no harm. Here are some more recent examples. These are all in the slides for this chapter. Look at this case in your textbook holding that Case Western Reserve University was correct in denying a diploma to a medical student who had met all the academic standards but not the ethical standards. Here's a very interesting case from about just 6 months ago. Citibank fired someone for lying over probably less than $25 on his expense reports about claiming food and drink for somebody else as your own business expense. That was specifically a no-no in the Citibank rules and policies, and they fired someone for allowing Citibank to pay for the meal of the employee's partner, and that firing was upheld. Starting in 2024, the CPA exam is going to cover a law that addresses business ethics, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, first passed in 1977 when it became known that many companies, big companies, were paying bribes but weren't calling them bribes in their financial statements. They were calling them something that sounded a lot more benign than that, and that law was passed, making paying bribes illegal, and also for purposes of CPA exam, making it illegal to record them wrongly in financial statements. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act anti-bribery provisions are pretty simple. The key is intent. Words do not have to be so spoken, and certainly no agreement has to be written. There are, you might hear, exceptions for so-called small dollar amount of grease payments, such as to get a building permit. But most companies have said we're not going to risk it. What is one person's grease payment is a bribe to somebody else. The accounting provisions in the FCPA are actually in the Securities Act of 1934, which we looked at last week. For example, you can't call a bribe a commission and get away with it. Here's a case from about 8 months ago against the big company that makes Post-it notes, 3M. They had to pay the Securities and Exchange Commission $6.6 million because they were providing vacation trips to people at Chinese companies, and because Chinese companies are owned by the Chinese government, they're covered by the FCPA, and they didn't call them that, and the Securities and Exchange Commission called them on it and fined them a lot of money. Here's an example of what KPMG has for its in-house ethical training. Here is your last extra credit opportunity. This is the new logo, by the way, of the PCAOB. By Friday, April 26th at 11:59 p.m., send me a Canvas mail message telling me what accounting firm recently received the largest fine ever imposed by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, and tell me briefly why they were fined that. Tuesday, tomorrow, I'm posting this on the 22nd. Please answer the survey. That's a quiz actually in Canvas. The results of I'll promptly publish the results of that survey, and the results of that survey will be a question on the last exam. And finally, here is our calendar. Today is April 22nd. The reflective memo is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. The professional responsibility survey is due Tuesday the 23rd. I'll post the results promptly. The third exam will close on Friday the 26th of April at 11:59 p.m. Of course, it will open before that. You all are to be commended for the diligent work that you did during these 7 weeks. This is a lot of content, and it's been a pleasure having you in this class.